All right, let's talk about corporate sustainability. You hear all the buzzwords, right? Going green, net zero, but what are companies actually doing behind the scenes? Well, today we're going to pry open the consultant's toolkit and deconstruct the real strategies and tools businesses are using to get this stuff done. Let's dive in.
Now, to make sure this isn't just theory, we're going to use a real-world guide, the Pierce Sustainability Consulting Group. Looking at the services they offer gives us a perfect, practical window into what's happening right now in boardrooms and on the ground.
Yeah, you've heard these terms thrown around everywhere. ESG, net zero, carbon credits. Honestly, it can feel like a bit of a maze of jargon. But stick with me. The whole point here is to cut through that noise and show you the clear, actionable plans behind the buzzwords.
So here's our roadmap. We've broken this toolkit down into 5 key parts. We'll start with the big why now question. Then we'll look at the master blueprint, dive into the nitty-gritty climate tools, explore what lies beyond just carbon, and finally, figure out how companies prove any of this is actually making a difference. Okay, first things first. Why is sustainability suddenly a massive boardroom issue? Simple. The pressure is coming from everywhere. You've got investors demanding long-term vision, regulators writing new rules, and customers who are, more than ever, voting with their wallets. It's become a force that's just impossible to ignore. And this really gets to the heart of it. It's like a two-sided coin. On one side, businesses have to manage these huge new risks. Think everything from supply chain chaos to new government mandates. But on the other side, there's this massive opportunity to create real long-term value. And that gap, right there, is where the consultants come in. So let's get into the toolkit itself. The first and, honestly, the most fundamental tool is the master plan. You see, before a single solar panel gets installed or a single tree gets planted, a company needs a solid strategy. And that strategy is called ESG. So what on earth is ESG? The easiest way to think about it is like a company's report card. But instead of just grading profits, it grades them on their environmental impact, their social responsibilities, how they treat their people and their communities, and their corporate governance, which is all about how the company is run. It is the absolute foundation for everything else they do. In practice, an ESG strategy isn't just one thing. It breaks down into some really concrete actions. A consultant might help a company build a strategy that's tailored just for them, then help them report their progress using recognized global standards so they can be compared apples to apples. It also involves figuring out what really matters to customers and employees, and even building these ESG criteria right into their investment decisions. This quote from our source material just nails it. This is not about PR stunts or looking good anymore. ESG has become absolutely essential for keeping investors happy, for staying on the right side of the law, and for building a business that's meant to last. It is, bottom line, a business imperative. Okay, so we've got the master blueprint. Now, let's zoom in on the next section of the toolkit. These are the specific tools companies pull out when they're tackling the massive, urgent challenge of climate change. Getting to net zero isn't some kind of magic trick. It's a really methodical, step-by-step process. It always starts with measurement. You have to do a full inventory of your greenhouse gas emissions. You can't manage what you don't measure, right? From there, you build a reduction plan. Then comes the action, bringing in renewables, and where you absolutely have to, using offsets. The final step is getting the whole thing certified by a third party. Let's talk for a second about one of the most well-known and sometimes controversial tools in this kit, carbon credits. The idea is pretty simple. If a company can't completely eliminate an emission right here, it can pay to prevent or remove the same amount of emissions somewhere else in the world, say by funding a wind farm or a reforestation project. It's a way of balancing the carbon books. But, and this is a huge but, credibility here is everything. To make sure an offset is real and not just smoke and mirrors, companies rely on tough certification standards. 2 of the biggest players are the Verified Carbon Standard, or VCS, which is a leading global framework, and the Gold Standard, which is famous for also making sure the projects help local communities and sustainable development. Now, climate strategy isn't just about playing offense, it's also about playing defense. Companies have to take a hard look at their own vulnerabilities. Are factories in areas prone to flooding? Is our supply chain at risk from drought? Frameworks like the TCFD, that's the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, help them figure out these very real financial risks and report them to investors. So we've looked at the big ESG blueprint and the climate action plan. But a really complete sustainability toolkit goes way beyond just carbon. So now let's pan out and see how this all fits into a much bigger picture. And this, to me, is where it gets really fascinating. The toolkit expands to tackle these incredibly complex and interconnected problems. We're talking about things like managing a company's impact on biodiversity, helping to build more sustainable food systems, and looking at environmental risks that go way beyond carbon, like water pollution or running out of critical resources. And it's important to remember, these corporate actions aren't just happening in a bubble. A lot of them are specifically designed to align with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. This is how a company's project on, say, clean water can directly contribute to a globally recognized mission to make the world a better place. And the scale of these projects can be massive. Consultants are getting involved in designing entire smart and sustainable cities with infrastructure built to last. They're also deep in the energy sector, helping companies integrate solar and wind and even roll out advanced technologies like carbon capture.
Okay, this brings us to our final and maybe the most critical part of the toolkit. Because after all the planning and all the action, a company has to be able to prove it. This last piece is all about measurement, verification, and being transparent.
But man, this is way easier said than done. The challenges are huge. How do you make sure the data coming from 100 different suppliers around the world is actually accurate? How do you share it transparently without being accused of greenwashing? How do you keep up with all the different global reporting standards? It is a serious data headache. Which is exactly why the tools for reporting have had to evolve so dramatically. We're in the middle of this fundamental shift, away from those clunky, static, once-a-year reports built on spreadsheets and towards something way more alive and dynamic. And that solution is the digital dashboard. These things are basically powerful, interactive command centers. They pull in data from all over the company and visualize it in real time. This lets a manager track key metrics, see what's working and what isn't, and make smart decisions on the fly. Plus, it provides that transparent data that stakeholders are demanding. So who actually needs this entire toolkit? The short answer is, well, pretty much everyone. Big companies and their investors need it to manage risk and find value. Governments need it to set policy and build resilient cities. And even NGOs need these tools to measure their own impact and make sure they're making a real difference. So there you have it. We've officially unpacked the Sustainability Toolkit. We've seen the blueprints, the climate action plans, and the high-tech tools for measurement. The strategies are there, the technology exists, which really just leaves us with one final and pretty urgent question to think about. Now that the path is becoming clearer, will these tools be picked up and used with the speed and scale that these challenges demand?